Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable with lies they eat like comfort food? To disregard the bogus claims and pseudoscientific claims. Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace, but ilkes and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible, holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was normal to have to prove a claim you make, and folks really feel ashamed to express some content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes, it's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road, the reason stay strapped with logic and facts. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road, the reason.
Hi, good afternoon and welcome to Road to Reason. I'm Tiffany Harding.
I'm Paul Sheehan.
Just before we came up, I said, let's put a smile on. We're going to have a good show today, right?
Yep.
So we are going to discuss something that's broad, that belongs to everyone, that no one can really define, but it pretty much is one of the main reasons why we're here. Paul?
Well, I was reviewing news stories for today's episode, and one of the things I've been tripping across is a lot of stories coming out recently about people saying they were atheists and now they're not, and religious people claiming to identify what they believe is atheism and how to debate atheists and what an atheist really is. And we're back to this place where I think a lot of religious people are feeling threatened by atheism, so they're trying to change the definition.
Yeah. So
some people don't understand what it means.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what exactly defines atheism, not exactly atheists, but at least the ism in itself. And why does it seem like it's such a threat to those who are religious?
Yep.
So that's the thing. Because if you can define something, then you can tear it down however you want.
Pretty much.
You know?
And that's kind of how religion works,
yes.
Just in general. And just to let our viewers know, we're going to do a little different today. We're actually going to be talking about this the whole episode. We're not actually be doing the news segment and whatnot. We're also going to invite you to call in, as we always are, a live call-in show. We'd love to hear your takes, thoughts, and opinions if you agree or disagree with us. Ring us up. Let us know. Hey, look, there's a phone number.
For this day only, please give us a call.
Yeah, I prayed and it happened. It must be true.
That's what happened. You prayed for people to call in, and they'll call in, and it'll be not because they saw the number, but because your prayers were answered.
No, I'm talking about just the graphics coming up. I said, I spoke it, and then it happened. So this is how it works. Don't
Absolutely.
You know? Okay.
So one thing I wanted to talk about first to start off is exactly how many of us are there. Okay, so when I say us, I mean people who are generally non-believers, those who define themselves as atheists. So according to Pew Research Center, the nuns continues to rise every year, every decade or so. Yeah. There's more and more people who wouldn't even call themselves an atheist, but they don't prescribe to any religion. And they didn't even specify if this person believes in a deity or not. If they say they're a nun, that number is rising up.
Sure.
Why do you think that is?
That's an interesting question. I happen to believe, in large part, it has to do with the rise of the internet, because in years past, people could literally live in vacuums that were isolated in pockets that were religious.
Right.
And with the age of the internet, and we've seen a microcosm, or like a sample of this with Scientology, for instance, where they came from a culture where they really were heavily vested in their own community. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, they're not really supposed to look at the internet, especially things that are skeptical about their religion.
You mean Scientologists?
Scientologists, right. Huh. So the internet, and they have this saying in Scientology, like about, hiding from your doubts and things like this. And what the internet has done is it's given people a very safe way to investigate their doubts without fear of being exposed. You couldn't go to your minister or your pastor and really lay all your doubts and kind of challenge them to answer you without fear of repercussion. The internet allows this. You can put up an identity that is a false, sock account or whatever.
Right.
You can start going, oh, hey, I'm not crazy. There are other people who think this too.
Yes.
So this is one of the reasons why I see religion on the decline.
Right.
And the other thing I think is that with the ongoing technology that we have in the world, it just gets harder and harder for people to believe, in very primitive things when technology keeps advancing us. They're living in the world of advanced technology, even if they haven't totally bought into it.
Right.
So there's that contradiction.
So it's education, it's knowledge, it's learning that you aren't alone.
In an environment.
Yeah. Because like me, I thought I was crazy when I first started doubting.
Well, you are, but that, for different okay.
For different reasons. No, but I thought I was, when I was younger, about 20 years ago, I'm not dating myself, but I thought there was something wrong with me.
Well,
because
I
wasn't.
Yourself. You need to find a man for
No, dating myself isn't telling him how old I am.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. No, but seriously, you think you're alone when you're in an environment, and it's not like I had any bad experiences in church. My church was fine. It was benign. I enjoyed it was my social circle.
Sure.
So when I started doubting, and I was standing out from other people, I thought it was me.
Right.
I thought the problem was me, and so I didn't share with anyone until I found a book. And it was called called The Skeptic's Guide to the Bible, Born Again Skeptic's Guide to the Bible. I found it in a thrift store, actually at Goodwill. And it was by Ruth Hermans Green, yep. And I picked it up and actually hid this book under my mattress. And I read it. And it made me realize that, okay, these things I was saying, it wasn't me, it wasn't wrong. And it helped me.
And to my point, the internet is that book, but on steroids.
Well, but when I was younger, there was no internet.
Right.
So
but I'm saying,
yeah.
when we discussed why it keeps multiplying as fast as it does.
So that's why we're going to talk about something that's always interested me is that when that process reverses.
Yeah.
Okay?
Or the myth of the process reversing.
What do you mean?
Well, there's a lot of people who say, I used to be an atheist, but now I'm a Christian. And were they ever really an atheist? And so, yeah, I mean, we do want to look at people who really were anti or non-theist and entrenched in it that are now religious, and how it is that they came to be that. But I think there's also this kind of like discussion we're going to have about people who are just benignly not religious. They never were. They were just never exposed to it, and then at some point they became religious.
Benignly not religious.
Yes.
That's that's interesting.
Well, I mean, when I say benignly not religious, it's that it was an absence of religion in their life.
Right.
And it wasn't even a consideration.
So the concept wasn't there.
Wasn't even there.
So
it just didn't even really register with them to even think about it.
Would you consider that person an atheist or a?
Only in the loosest. It needs a technical definition of that they don't believe.
Right. So do you have to have the belief first before you consider an atheist?
Well, no, but for practical purposes, when you start getting into discussions on theology and debating back and forth about who's right and wrong, you do.
Right.
So, you can be an atheist in this very kind of loose way of, I never really even thought about it. It was never an issue for me. And then I became religious. Yeah, I guess you can use the word and say you were an atheist that became religious.
Right.
But when you start having an intellectual discussion about intellectual honesty about a person who has arrived at the decision that religion has not met its burden of proof, then all of a sudden this person's now a theist, and you start examining why they are. That's for all the reasons that are 100% wrong that their old self would have discounted.
Right.
And they can't explain beyond.
Especially,
I can't. The universe is just too amazing for me. Okay, well, that's not an actual factual statement.
Right. So if you ever ascribed, is that the word I'm looking for? If you ever considered yourself a non-believer and you were like, you know what, the universe is what it is, you don't see it as anything other than, look, this is nature, this is our universe. But if you have to prescribe that, you know what, it's just too beautiful to not have it without God in it. I was wrong all these years. That's what we have to talk about. We're going to talk about my man Kirk Cameron.
No, we have to. I don't want to talk about Kirk Cameron.
Yes, we have to talk about Kirk Cameron.
You can't make me talk about Kirk Cameron.
Because his story is like that movie. I'm going to say it. God's Not Dead. Do you remember it came out a few years ago?
Yeah, it was. God's Not Dead was such a definitive film, and the final word on the subject that they had to come out with God's Not Dead Part 2.
the straw man built up, the straw man atheist built up in that, you know, your life is a shamble, it's a wreck. And then he found God, and now he's, you know, so that's one of the
I'm
things
mad at you for pushing God, and I'm going to get you fired. I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
Like, oh, God.
It's, it makes me think that they need that
Well, I hope
straw.
David Tamayo's going to stick around for when we go on break
So this
in
is how
about 2 minutes so we can say hi to him.
This is about how professional we were, because our good friend showed up and we're having to smile and keep going. We'll talk to him during the break.
All right. Well, we hope.
Well, we hope.
He ran away. You know what?
He's coming back.
I think he just became a theist and he's turned his back on us. It's that simple, ladies and gentlemen. Don't you know?
You just have to throw away every.
You just have to throw away all your
piece
reason.
of knowledge that you've gained over the years.
Open your heart.
He's having way too much fun, is what he's doing.
It's like that scene from God, what was it? Miller's Crossing. He's like, "Open your heart." He's like, "What heart?" It's like,
that's how we are. That's how atheists with our black
in truth, we don't think with our hearts. We think with our minds. That's the truth.
Yeah, poignant. It's real poignant. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. We'll definitely be right back.
Because of my diabetes, I lost the sight in my left eye. Misconceptions continue to surround this monster public health issue, but the simple truth is, diabetes can often be prevented and complications avoided. You're not alone. Understand the realities of diabetes and know that you can manage it and lead a full, active life.
There's an alarming trend in the world today. Everywhere you go, people are saying that cinema is dead. But cinema is not dead. My name is Count Simon Gauntley, and on my television program, Count Gauntley's Horrors from the Public Domain, I make it my mission to resurrect forgotten film classics. I promise to dredge the sewers and ford the stagnant streams of film history to ensure that no film is truly lost to the ages. Count Gauntley and FPA, keeping cinema alive! Alive! Alive!
Well, even though Joseph's been gone 18 months, we've made the decision to keep all his things as they were when he was here last. I finally just packed his toothbrush away like 6 months ago. It had been sitting on the counter in the bathroom. And I was cleaning the bathroom one day and I just thought, okay, it's time to put the toothbrush in the medicine cabinet.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week, the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube. And remember to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Yeah.
And we don't want you paying hell. So make sure you're watching Road to Reason.
That's one thing.
He was amused with that line, by the way.
He was?
He was.
He loved it.
Like,
How long ago was
so
that?
good. That was like 4 years ago.
Richard Dawkins. But anyway, he, when you read his book, he went to a Christian school when he was a kid, and but he said he was kind of like me. He never really believed any of it.
Yeah.
He never became a zealot, but his love of science helped keep him grounded. Yeah. Do you think that happens to a lot of people? Oh,
Absolutely. But even then, you run into people who are physicists who still believe in God because they want to. And this is the real question, which is, how do you arrive at these things?
Yeah.
And how do you reconcile what you want to believe with what is actually factual? And this brings us to a good story right here.
Okay. So he was talking about this.
The Metro UK did an article by Andy Hill. I'm an atheist who goes to church. Here's why you should too. Okay, well, I'm not saying you can. I used to go to church because somebody I liked went to church. I would go sit with them and hang out with them. And of course, then they started accusing me of going to church just to get arguments to pick apart their religion. I'm like, no, your religion does that all on its own, but whatever. So in either case,
you're a jerk. Just kidding.
No, I'm a nice guy. I went to be with this person, And
Was this a girl person?
Doesn't matter. So.
Sorry.
Okay, so basically, some of the arguments Andy makes in here. This is what we call. This is like somebody who has not gone down the road and says, "I'm not an atheist anymore. I'm now a theist," because they want to hold on to that theistic position. Mm-hmm. And what they do in these situations is they come up with the exact same arguments and fallibilities that people who are religious are. So. Here's what Andy has to say. For what it's worth, I still firmly believe there is no God and no afterlife. But, however, is another way, and that's how Andy uses it. However, something about having a son, an impetus to strive for deeper meaning and longing.
Wait. He has a son?
Yes.
Okay.
Meaning and longing for some continuity with the past made me think harder about spirituality. Well, once you use the word spirituality, you're going down that road of religion. So basically, most Sunday mornings before he came along, I was still up hell-raising from the night before of guzzling spirits and talking beep with aforesaid mates. Now, already this is the I'm not worthy, my life before I converted was not worth living. It was, I was a hellraiser.
His son gave him a deeper meaning.
It gave him a cause to find the deeper meaning. But since that sort of caper is frowned upon when you become a dad, my weekends changed radically and fast. I spent much of early fatherhood soberly pushing a buggy around London in my own world looking at architecture. And we're already starting to go down the road of, I see all these amazing things around me, therefore there must be a God. Far lovelier and more arresting than the skyscrapers and snooty Georgian squares, there are some bloody lovely churches in London. But I'm an atheist and I don't believe in a God or an afterlife.
I mean, you can appreciate the beauty of a church. You can appreciate the beauty of a church without going in and basically giving up your sensibilities.
Yes, now we got to continue selling the churches. Chances are you'll pass a church on your way home. Stop for a few minutes, take a good long look and wander around it. See if you can sneak in. It's big and old, proper old. Weddings, funerals, baptisms, most of which are religious in nature or the way they're executed in Western society are.
Right.
World wars, collapsing dynasties, cultural revolutions. The churches have seen it all.
Well, you can tell this is...
Churches retain this information? Yeah, I mean, granted that they've survived through these things.
I can knock a hole through that, but I'm glad he's in England, because in America we got churches that used to be, Taco Bells. Think about
I don't know about you, but I certainly worship the chalupa taco.
There's churches in strip malls here.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't make them beautiful or ancient, but I can understand everything in London is ancient and old.
So now our non-religious, still atheist person says, one autumn Sunday morning last year, I was out with my lad and on a whim ducked into St. Philip's, a fancy Gothic revival jobby by my old flat.
Is that in British English? Is having a problem
I guess.
there?
Tip, tip, tatty-ho. Inside there was even more stunning. So he keeps just going on and on about it, right? And he meets a twinkling middle-aged lady in a pristine robe, was telling a story about sharing, which is actually really lovely when you think about it.
Oh boy.
Because you couldn't get this outside of a church, right?
Right.
Because we all know that atheists are immoral. Then everyone started singing, because nobody sings outside of a church. And a kindly stranger handed me a hymn book, and I opened at the proper page, so I joined in.
Oh,
it's almost mystical the way this is going down.
I mean, he's lucky that he didn't come across like a cult.
Yeah.
It just happened to be a beautiful old Gothic church and not like, the Church of the Flying Woo-Woo.
Well, then he goes on.
Nice and convenient.
Yeah, he goes on and he's talking about uplifting spirits, moral encouragements. Because churches never teach anything that's immoral. A good preacher, there are. To be sure, there are plenty of beep ones. So now we're starting to my religion is the true religion, not like those phony religions, okay? We'll leave you with current affairs and the life of the parish into his or her sermon, leaving you with practical, memorable take-home lessons. What do the Gospels have to teach us about Donald Trump, or Leviticus about climate change, or Psalms 84 about the closing of the local pub? So for a guy who's not religious,
why does it matter what
he's now drawing religious references from a Bible, which is a purely religious text?
So my question is, why even say that you're a non-believer in the first place?
Because this is the dishonest nature of people like this, which is there are two elements to this. One is that they know the absurdities of the religion and they can't reconcile that when they're selling this garbage to other people.
Okay.
The other side of this is that you see this all the time with religious people who just flat out lie because they know you will turn around and walk away if you start proselytizing.
Yeah.
So this is what they call safe pointing in Scientology, which is, it's like, oh, nice shoes. They start talking about things. Yeah, exactly. They start talking about things, that are really, they know when they're saying that, they don't really care about that. What they're really trying to do is soften you up and slowly start to, no, actually your shoes are just like horrible.
I'm not wearing shoes, just to let you know.
Oh, is that what that is? Oh my God, those are your feet? Oh.
But I know what you mean.
God, please.
They called it love bombing.
Well, love bombing is a little different. Love bombing is where you're making the person feel really good about themselves, and then you pull it away. Oh. But this is where it's more insidious. You don't even know it's happening because they're integrating their religious beliefs, their indoctrination of you in such subtle ways you don't even know it's happening. And that's what this article is basically. If you just keep reading. So
you're saying that, and I'm seeing it too because I think he's full of it.
Yeah.
I think that it's easier for people who are already doubting or people who believe to say, you know what, atheists can change. This guy did.
Yeah.
Because he saw the actual beauty that I see every day. And you know what, that's fine. That's fine for them to think. But people like that, who are spreading that idea, that all you need is to just see a beautiful church and meet a nice old lady who gives you a Werther's.
Yeah, and there's some really good lessons you can learn in the Bible.
And there's some really good lessons you can learn in the Bible.
Like stoning your gay neighbors and,
that's what we call Tuesday.
Killing your disobedient children, or, I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful things you can learn.
It's not nice to rape them, but if you do, you better marry her.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sort of
nail
thing.
their ear to the door so you can own them. I mean, it's just all these insane things that you can learn from the Bible that this person doesn't talk about. The key to this is, I'm not religious, I don't believe in God, but I'm in church and I'm preaching stuff out of a book, and the people in this group are good, and therefore I'm going to keep going, and you should do it too.
So what is the point for them to take people like us?
Yes, and try to convert us, save our souls.
Because
it's okay to lie to us, because in the end, they're saving our souls.
Well, so that means what they're telling me is that I myself am not sure of who I am or what I don't believe.
Right, and even if you see yourself as a good person, you could be a better person if you just were doing what they were doing.
So you didn't see, a better person. See, that's how subtle it is.
And it's like, you don't need to be religious, but you should still come to church.
Sounds like how people sell a car.
That's
exactly, broke.
Exactly.
Just as long as they ride it off the lot, then it has nothing to do with us. It sounds like you're selling something.
Well, and that's what I find. So here we have a person.
Do the negative person.
So now we got it. So this is.
And I have one too.
This is so what we're looking at. We have one. We just looked at a case of a person who is, I think, lied to themselves and is willing to lie to other people. And this is a person who clearly did not understand what it means to be an atheist. An atheist is a person who does not believe in supernatural, spiritual, gods, whatever you call it, because the burden of proof has not been met. That person never even addressed the issue of burden of proof.
Right.
They somehow claim that they don't believe in these things, yet they actually suggest that you start following religious doctrines.
So why?
Right. So, well, I think we explained why. Now we're going to get into a journalist by the name of Sally Quinn, who's a longtime journalist and author, and is also the founding editor of On Faith, a site full of religious opinions and essays. And it used to be hosted at the Washington Post. Now, she also wrote a book called Finding Magic, a spiritual memoir. That should tell you something right there.
Magic.
All right, so she says that John Meekum was, I honestly don't know who John Meekum is, so sorry about that, I didn't do that research. It's a person that led her away from faith. Now, Sally's been on shows like on NBC.
MSNBC.
MSNBC. And they were having an interview with her, and they were talking, and she says, you're not an atheist. This is and I said, yes, I am. And he said, no, you're not. And he said, you're not a negative person.
Oh.
And the word atheist is a negative word. It means you're against something, and that's not who you are. Well, I guess anyone who is against child abuse is a negative person. I guess anyone who is against genocide is a negative person. Anyone who's against racism is a negative person.
This has happened to me before.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't often go about spouting, but if someone asks me, yes, I'll say, no, I'm not a religious person. Actually, I'm an atheist, and I don't believe. I was like, but you seem so happy. I'm like, well, because I am happy. There's nothing wrong with me. That idea that we're all negative creatures that live under rocks and we're miserable and we're mad at God, no, it's not that at all.
It's just we don't believe in a God to be mad at.
There's more to it. But people want you to be negative.
Right.
And then someone told me, no, you have to be miserable. You know why? Because I think that those people, they are miserable.
Well,
they go to church and it doesn't work.
This is a confirmation bias, and it is a form of bigotry in the sense that where, you get somebody who sees some white guy wearing suspenders, coveralls, and cowboy boots and decides that he's a member of the Klan, or you see some black guy walking down a street and he's got holes in his t-shirt and his baggy pants, and you're assuming that he's a gangbanger. You know, you're making an assumption on your own ignorance, your own preconceived ideas of, oh, I can categorize this person because they don't fit into my worldview or the way I think the world is or should be. And that's exactly what's going on here.
So they're defining an atheist as a negative person who is missing something.
This person did do that. And he goes on to say, and this is something I see all the time, and I got to go back to Scientology, they love to use this one, where they say, look, you don't even know anything about religion. So the Scientologists, well, you don't know anything about our religion. Okay, so it's like, yeah, actually we do. We do know. The fact, now they will say you know about religion or their religion when you endorse it. See, now all of a sudden you're knowledgeable. Now you get it.
But if you start to question.
But if you question or you disagree or you take a stance against that particular religion or religion in general, well, you're just ignorant. Because you have to be ignorant. Because if you weren't ignorant, you'd be thinking just like me.
Oh, again, you know.
And I'm not an ignorant person.
I wish that I had the salesmanship skills of some of these people because they can sell it. They can sell it. It's fascinating to me. It's fascinating how easy it comes to some of them.
Well, this is why,
a lot of it's marketing.
I've seen these like street preachers. They don't sound a whole lot different than a barker, you know, or a used car salesperson.
Yeah.
It's the same spit shine, you know, shoe shines, same cheap polyester suits, the same, you know, same phony smiles on their face. Hey, friend, how's it going?
The same promises. Friend. The same promises. Well, I haven't seen the car yet. Trust me, it's good.
Yeah, I actually went to a used car lot once. The guy was like, "Well, you got to sit in it before." He goes, "Make me an offer," and I'm like, "We haven't even driven it." He's like, "Make me an offer first." I'm like, "See you later."
Yep. No, we're gonna need more than that. But please go on. Tell me about how, because she was she's a negative person.
Okay, so basically, you know, they go off on. She had this person go off on her that supposedly converted her,
right?
Stating that she didn't know anything about religion. If you're going to be an atheist, at least you have to learn something about it. And so he gave me this long reading list of religious books, and I said, go off, read these books, and then come back and tell me you're an atheist. Well, I've read all the books, and I'm still an atheist.
Is that what she said?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of like I read all your religious texts. I've read the Quran, the Bible. I've read the Torah. I've read various. I've read everything that Buddha supposedly wrote, but I've read, because my memory was there wasn't like condensed in a book. Maybe it is, but the way I read it, it was various statements and things like that Buddha supposedly wrote, if there was even a Buddha. So basically, again, this goes back to, well, if you just knew it well enough, then you would accept it. Well, my version is accept what? Accept Christianity over Islam?
Wouldn't it be
Islam
hilarious?
Over Judaism?
Wouldn't it be hilarious if he was trying to convert her to Christianity and he said, no, read these books and
I'm a Satanist!
Yeah, that's the same.
Hail Satan!
And then he came back and was like, I do believe now. It's Satan. Oh, you picked the wrong one. You're supposed to pick the one I want you to read. I'm sorry.
That's all right. But then it says, so basically another argument that was used here was, I was an angry atheist. She's talking to the interviewer here.
Angry.
And that really doesn't make any sense. Because if you're angry at God, then you must believe in God. Well, that is actually a true statement. That is one actual piece of truth.
What?
Hang on.
What?
That is actually true. If you are angry at God, you must believe in God to be angry.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah. Okay.
So that actually is a true statement. And this is where I would say then that person does not know what it means to be an atheist. They're just a religious person who cannot reconcile the lies and misconceptions of their religion and gets angry at the contradictions.
So like in the movie God's Not Dead, when they had the professor who was angry at God because someone died or whatever. And so that's why he was an atheist. And not only
never an atheist to begin with.
No. And so that's what made that movie so offensive to me. When you finish this, I will get into that because, oh boy, there's a resurgence.
Well, why don't you go ahead and talk about that a little bit?
So I wanted to talk about, there's a resurgence of Christian movies. There's a company called PureFlix. Right, and PureFlix is a production company, and they make someone on the internet, one of my favorite movie reviewers, he came up with the term Christploitation. Do you like that? Christploitation, basically movies that exploit Christians' true beliefs or semi-beliefs.
We're talking to you, Mel Gibson.
They have like God's Not Dead, like War Room, and even back in the 90s you had movies.
Kevin Sorbo.
Kevin Sorbo, yes, and he's super religious. And they had movies in the 90s. There's a really famous one called Second Glance, and it has the famous last line where the kid goes, "Hey, Scotty, Jesus, man." So it's an old movie, but basically
literally all I can say to that is Jesus.
Jesus. No, the movie is basically about a kid who's a Christian. He's a good boy, but something happens with popularity at school, and he wishes he wasn't a believer, and then his life falls apart. Like, It's a Wonderful Life. Right. But anyway, so there's a movie coming out this year called The Case for Christ, and it's about an atheist who converts, reverts, I don't even know which word to use, into a Christian, and this is their story, and it's supposed to be a happy story. And he says, there are so many reasons I didn't want there to be a God, because I didn't want to be held accountable. I didn't want to be held accountable. It's like I couldn't laugh.
What?
I laughed. I opened the Bible, man. I read it. It means I couldn't laugh at it anymore. You know, things like that.
Read the Bible, and I would say that I laughed, I cried, and I got angry. And it was at the Bible, not what was in it.
So the person, Lee Strobel, wrote the book, The Case for Christ. You've heard of him?
Oh, I know Lee Strobel.
Okay. And so they said, quote, to see your life put on a screen, not just random things from your life, but those emotional moments of the good, the bad, and the ugly, the conflict we had after Leslie, his wife, became a Christian, and I was still an atheist. The arguments to see that reviled is difficult for us to watch. Relived, not reviled. Sorry, speed reading. But what do you think of that?
It's just typical.
Of course it is.
In fact, it seems like it's a narrative that we've already talked about on today's show. Mm-hmm. It's going to be throughout this discussion, because this is the thing. There's no originality in this stuff.
No.
And what you're pointing out with this movie and with the movies you've been talking about, I'm pointing out and I'm seeing with these articles that are popping up all online. Mm-hmm. And this reeks of desperation to me. This is where I see
What do you mean desperation?
People are having religious crises. Why would you make a movie like God's Not Dead, 1 and 2, because 1 didn't do the job.
Right.
Why would you be like, why would you, like as if the Bible alone isn't good enough, you got to come out with this movie. Why would you be coming up with these articles, talking about how you should go to a church, even if you're not religious? And there's really great stuff in the Bible, even if you're not religious.
Right.
If there wasn't if these people didn't see a huge hole in the world that they're trying to live in.
Right.
And as you pointed out, people are becoming less and less religious all the time.
Yes.
So what I'm seeing is a reaction to that. And it's a bad reaction.
And even if you don't consider yourself like a strong atheist like us, and even if you're just not, if you're a secular person, they still see that. You're totally benign, but you're secular. They still see that as a threat that they have to come at you.
Yep.
So in defining atheism, okay, I'm going to put in just plain old secular. I'm going to toss that in there too.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing. It's like, the word atheist by itself doesn't say much, but saying you're a secular atheist means that you're taking a stance, more of a stance. To me, we're obviously interpreting these definitions ourselves, but when I look at them historically, anyone could be an atheist even by accident. Just like the fact that, as I was saying before, they never occurred to them to become religious.
Oh, I see.
It's like
you weren't raised in it.
You weren't raised in it. You never really challenged yourself on the thought one way or the other.
So
but a secular atheist is someone who's kind of taken the position of no religion based off of not being religious.
Right. So that person who never had the concept of God to begin with.
Well, they might even have the concept. They never really, because you hear it,
Yeah.
but you never
That's
really
one thing.
digest it or reflect upon it.
Can I do an aside? There's one thing in those movies and those stories you always get when the person converts the non-believer. It's like, you've never heard of the Bible before? You're an American. You're an American, and you've lived in this nation, and you've never heard of the Bible. They always present that. Have you noticed that?
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Let me tell you the good news.
Wow, no, I didn't know. Here's a Bible. So there's another movie. I'm really into these Christploitation movies, and it's called, I forget, but it's about a boy in high school, and he wants to try to seduce the Christian girl. And so he...
Oh, wait, a boy trying to seduce a girl?
Yeah, but he pretends to be a Christian, right? To hook up with the girl.
Let me guess, in the end, God really does.
Yes, so
work his way
of course
into
in
his
the
heart.
end, but the fact is that it's so funny because they did the montage of him learning about Christianity. He's like, which one of these Bibles did Jesus teach out of? You are an American person, you've never heard of the Bible before. Really, what is this fantasy world that they're living in?
Jesus, if he even existed, didn't teach either Bible because they weren't around when Jesus was around.
But they make it seem like the non-believers or the doubters or the worldly people have never been exposed to any kind of Christianity in their lives.
Yeah, all you gotta do is turn on the television, deal with politics. No.
Okay, I'm sorry. Where were we?
Okay. So anyway, on this Patheos article talking about Ms. Quinn, the reporter here.
Right.
Greta Christina wrote a book about the fact that we're not angry at God. We're angry at people's beliefs in God and what they get them to do in the name of this made-up deity. That's what bothers us.
That bugs
me.
me.
When you're telling your gay son that he should burn in hell and kick him out of the house, and he goes out and commits suicide.
And they're like, that's not God.
I got a problem with that.
Yeah, what she's saying is that's not really God. That's the people.
Yeah, well, that's where they will go. But so anyway, they quote here that Quinn's failure to understand that suggests that her long journey to spirituality, she never once bothered to talk to other atheists about their doubts. And this is what I would suggest: if you're having a crisis and you didn't believe in God, and now you're starting to think about it, and you really want to be fair and honest, you should ask somebody who is schooled in secularism about why they're an atheist.
No, that's dangerous. That will lead you down the wrong path.
Well, if you're an honest person and you really don't want to be dishonest and go around and making false assumptions and accusations about what atheists are, don't you kind of owe it to yourself? To actually investigate what an atheist really thinks?
No, you're talking to the wrong side. If you're having a crisis of faith, you're supposed to talk to like a preacher or something.
Well,
or read Lee Strobel's book. I'd never heard of this person before. You said you learned of him?
Well, he's a Christian, like, investigative reporter / evangelist type kind of person.
But he used to be an atheist, apparently.
I don't know. It's possible, but what I know about Lee Strobel is all the books that he's written and the really bad science, so-called pseudoscience that he's ingested into those books. And, that's what I know about Lee Strobel. So, and that's the thing is, I try to, when somebody starts telling me they used to be an atheist and now they're a theist, the arguments that they give are just some of the worst.
I've got a great one. So I found another article. It's called Why Atheists Change Their Minds. And they gave 8 common factors, okay? Yeah. So tell me what you think of these common factors. This article was written by Matt Nelson last year, and this is on World of Fire. It's a blog, it's a Christian blog. So,
Go.
1, good literature and reasonable writing. Reasonable atheists usually become theists because they are reasonable, and furthermore, because they're honest. They're willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads, and in many cases, the evidence comes to the theists most coherently and well presented through the writers of believers of God.
This is why if you get an honest person who said that they've actually read the Bible from front to back, the majority of those people will say they're no longer religious.
Right.
And at the same time, you get very few people who are truly involved in science ever claiming to convert. It's a rare thing.
Right.
It's an extraordinarily rare thing.
So what do you think about people like J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, who were Christian writers.
Yeah. I mean, they're products of their time.
Yeah.
At times they be a changing. Yeah. So number 2.
Experimentation with prayer and the Word of God. Notice that, as long as it's Christianity, but anyway, he says...
I thought God was against experimenting. Or is that what college is for?
He said the Word of God is living. It has the power beyond human comprehension because it is God-breathed. That's a word that's on here. Yeah. Anyway, God speaks to man in many ways, but especially through prayer and the reading of inspired scriptures. So when curiosity or interest of non-believers leads to experimentations with prayer or reading the Bible, the results can be shocking, as many converts attest.
Well, this is where, okay, first off, you're having to experiment. Like, why is the true Word of God not self-evident? And so a person just keeps going and going and going until they've diluted themselves. And then all of a sudden, why is the path always different for everyone if there's one true Word of God? Mm-hmm. The other thing is this whole God breath thing. This goes back to, literally goes back to what in the Bible, they believed that your life, your breath was your life. They thought like your soul, you breathe. When you were breathing, they didn't understand what air was. Oh. So if you suffocated someone, you took the life out of them. So they actually believed that life, like the air was life.
Oh, wow.
So...
I mean, it makes sense.
It makes sense for someone who doesn't understand what air is. So for a person in this age to be using that language, that is, we know what air is, we know what air molecules are, you're borrowing a language that from a book that has absolutely been proven unequivocally to be false.
Written by people who didn't know what germs were. Written by people who didn't know what germs were.
Exactly.
So, number 3, historical study of the Gospels. Okay? Lee Strobel, who's back, the former legal editor of the Chicago Tribune and author of the influential work Case for Christ, which is now a movie, major motion pictures in theaters now, is a prime example of what happens.
Only it's not. But go on.
It's a prime example of what happens when an honest atheist sets out to establish once and for all whether claims of the gospel are reliable or not.
Well, there we go. You can only be an honest atheist if you agree with a theist. I
gotta read you Lee Strobel's quote. Lee Strobel. Strobel? Yeah. Stoffel. Okay. Case for Christ, he writes, I'll admit it. I was ambushed by the amounts and quality of the evidence that Jesus is the unique Son of God. I shook my head in amazement. I had seen defendants carted off to the death chamber on much less convincing proof. Wow. The cumulative facts and data pointed unmistakably toward a conclusion that I wasn't entirely comfortable in reaching.
Okay, so let's just deconstruct this baloney right away. First of all, we know there was no Moses. There's no archaeological evidence of any type in any way, shape, or form.
And he was like 600.
We know there was no mass exodus from Egypt. We know the Bible says Jesus supposedly said, that Jesus most likely didn't exist, said the mustard seed is the smallest seed in the world. Demonstrably false. Mm-hmm. Page after page after page. You can put your sins into a goat and run it off the edge of a cliff. Okay. In the form of demons, you possess you send your demons to a goat. What we call scapegoating. Okay.
Right.
Every page of the Bible is demonstrably false. And this guy's going to talk about honesty?
Well, my thing is, just because even if you find out that Jesus is the unique Son of God, okay, that's great. And? They never bring that up. Why?
They haven't even demonstrated there is a God.
No, and exactly. So just because now, okay, I believe that this person existed, doesn't mean you have to
in the hyperbolic position of, I've seen people carted off to the death chambers. It's like you've got to go over dramatic with it. It's like,
we got more of these.
It's like, okay, whatever. So next, please.
Honest philosophical reasoning. Number 4. So they're saying philosophy means the love of truth. Philosophy is meant to lead one to truth. I'm dying. No, and it certainly will. If the philosopher is willing to be honest and consider the arguments from both sides, And then the best arguments, follow the best arguments, whatever they may lead. So basically, he's saying that if somebody gives you a good argument, you have to be honest and reason with them.
No.
And
that's
that
not how
honesty,
facts and evidence is determined. I can give you a great argument that for the flying spaghetti monster.
Yes.
You know, I can even show you pasta and meatballs. Doesn't make the flying spaghetti monster true. Evidence and facts are what lead us to what is true. You can talk yourself into a stupor. And circular arguments are logical. They really are.
No, yeah.
You can have logical circular arguments. It has no bearing on whether it's true.
It's like the Oberos.
Next.
Eats his, okay. So number 5, and this is one that, don't look, I'll read it. Though this is one that I want to get into because it says reasonable believers. Now this is the rub that we've been talking about. It's the obnoxious position of some, but not all atheists, that in order to believe in God, one has to be lacking of intelligence and or reason. So that's the nail of the head right there. Okay, most atheists think that religious people are stupid.
Not true.
Is what he's saying. So he's saying that if you meet a believer who's reasonable, then that person will help you get back into religion. If you meet a So it says most atheists believe that modern science has ruled out the possibility for the existence of God. And for this reason, they tag believers with a lack of up-to-date knowledge.
See, here's the problem with this argument. Okay.
Yeah.
Science doesn't rule out the possibility of a God.
No.
We're always open to new evidence and data. What we can say, science has been able to show, is that of all the claims ever,
yes,
we have yet to prove a God.
Right.
So up to this point, the track record is 1-0, and it's always been 1-0.
Right.
And what really is important to keep in mind here is that the moment you start defining what God is when science can start tearing it apart.
Yeah.
And that's what historically has been done.
So that leads into number 6, which is the modern advancements and the limitations of science. So science can't answer all the questions. So he's saying Anthony Flew, who I have heard of, is one of the most famous atheists of the 20th century. He debated William Lane Craig, and others on the existence of God. But eventually his recognition of the profound order and complexity of the universe and its apparent fine-tuning was a decisive reason for the renowned atheist to change his mind.
If you want to see William Lane Craig, have his derriere handed to him, you simply need to go to YouTube. He's destroyed virtually in every debate he's ever been in.
Yeah.
And so you got one person who didn't understand atheist and now claim they're a theist, and therefore that's some proof of something. I don't know. Yeah. But what I'm seeing here over and over and over and over and over again is belief. You're not reasonable if you don't believe. The moment you believe, you're reasonable. A reasonable person would believe what we believe.
Science can't explain everything.
Science can't explain it, but you know what? Science keeps explaining more all the time, and the more it explains, the less people believe.
And the fact that everything is so fine-tuned.
Yeah, the fact that we know that the world doesn't live under a dome of water anymore, or that
is that thing?
That's it says in the Bible that's where
the firmament.
The firmament, yes, above us.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Cool.
The fact that we know that the mustard seed isn't the smallest seed. The fact that we know that you aren't possessed by demons and evil spirits.
I am.
So, yeah, I'm sorry. What did I say? The track record is 1-0, and it's always been 1-0, and it's never going to fucking change. Excuse my language.
So
I caught myself before I cursed. Go ahead.
So here's another one. Number 7, the evidence of the resurrection. So they're not only saying that atheists have, no, come on, don't, stop, don't give up. So it says, thank you to the phenomenal work of leading New Testament scholars, right? The case for Christ's resurrection has become more airtight than ever. And so for that reason is why atheists come back to the fold.
Yeah, make an assertion as true, and it'll be true.
And it'll be true. And
well, there's never been more evidence showing not only that Christ didn't exist, there's never been more evidence than there is now to show that there was never a resurrection. There's just no records of it. There's no. I mean, they're talking about evidence. There's zero, zilch, none. But go on.
So my last one, you're gonna love this one. I'm covering it so you can't see. The beauty of the world.
Sounds like they better talk to that guy in that article that goes to church, sees the beauty and structure.
He says that the strong notion that non-believers believe in God and they finally realize the beauty of everything.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, okay, so I'm going to move on to why bothering arguing with atheists.
We don't have that much longer, so
yep, we got a few
know
minutes.
how much atheists love to argue.
I'm going to make this real quick.
Okay.
We have a photograph. There we go. Now, the thing I love about this is that the National Catholic Register puts this picture up, and arguing with atheists, obviously they equivalent it with kids beating each other.
Wait, those aren't hobbits?
No.
Look at that kid's feet.
But I love it says, why bothering arguing with atheists? And it says, for those who know where to look, the evidence for God's love abounds. Well, if it abounds, then why do you need to know where to look for it? I mean, it's evident.
Right.
You know, and this is actually a really great article that we actually can't get that much into, but 2 quick points.
Do they say it's worth it to argue?
I would actually say people should read that article, but there are 2 sentences that I want to read here, and then I want to move on to one last item. Most critics missed or ignored the point, and I was criticized for not offering evidence of God's existence. It could have been such as I've written for them before. And then he goes on to talk about what he's written. I could have mentioned the very basic evidence, the existence of matter. How do you explain the existence of matter? Stuff like diamonds, oxygen, and Saturn. Hey, I'm going to prove God exists by asking a question. That's not proof, people.
Right.
Then we got another photograph that I want to go to real quick. Next photo, please. This is a. This is from. This is from a website called the Hellenic News, and what you're going to see here is they've stolen a copyrighted image for the Bible. We want to talk about morality. Where does theft come in? Should we stone this person, take him to the outskirts?
Okay, so the
city?
reason I broke out laughing, I haven't seen this picture, but the watermark jumped out at me.
The watermarks jumped out. It's like, you didn't even have the decency to like pay the $5 for the picture.
For a stock, or your own Bible to take a picture of.
If you want something to lampoon, if you want something to really lampoon, it's just the worst arguments ever. Go to HellenicNews.com, and it's proving the insanity of atheism with facts and physics, no foreknowledge.
Okay, so we got 2 minutes left. You got one more picture?
No, I just want to say that finally there is an article that's out. Atheists are, this is the Independent, atheists are nicer to Christians compared to the other way around if their religious identity is unknown, studies claim. In other words, Christians will often put on a nice, when they're pushing that I'm a Christian, they become nice.
Right.
Atheists just tend to be nicer in general. Just in general.
And so they need it to be, we need to be the enemy. So they need us to be miserable, angry, awful, horrible people.
Or they need an excuse to be nice. We don't.
Oh, dude, you got me. Dude.
We don't need an excuse to be nice.
Man.
We're just nice people.
Just nice people.
I need to be nice because I need to put on a good show because I'm telling you I'm moral. And now I need to be moral.
Where's your watermark, man?
Where's my watermark? It's right here on top of my head. It's 666.
No, it's just interesting. So that's it for today's show.
Yep. Well, tune in next week. I'm sure we'll have something exciting.
Hey, I had a good time.
Me too. Great job.
Thank you.
Start calling. Say hello.
I'm Tiffany Harding.
Paul Sheehan. Adios, muchachos. Hey, we still got like 15 seconds, man. We're cheating. We can't be skimping out on this show.
Oh my God. I'm going to start taking my mic off.
You led me down a path. I'm going to convert now.